I check it like you read Sing bowling it, yeah? I really don't mind.
You hit me once, I hit you back.
He's bowling like my Auntie Annie when she'd had too much sherry to drink.
Played over my head, then I set fire.
मैंने कहा बेटा बेटा होता है और बाप बाप होता है.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Pie Checkers Cricket Podcast. This is Vivek along with my fellow Pie Checkers, Sai, Shivam and Sumer. Now, it has been over 100 days since we had our last game of international cricket. Leave aside international matches, we haven't even had our Gully Mohalla Park matches that are essential feature of any Indian society. Perhaps the only matches that have been played have been those in our living rooms. Anyways, the wait is over and international cricket is all set to return on July 8th. However, like everything else in the world, cricket won't be the same with COVID still making its presence felt. The ICC has come up with new guidelines and regulations to help protect cricketers over the course of a match. So what are these guidelines and how are they going to impact the game, the boards, the players and the fans? To discuss this in detail, we have three very, very special guests joining us today from across the globe. From UK, we have George Dobell, who writes for ESPN Cricinfo, and we have seen him frequently on Polite Inquiries. Welcome, George, to Pie Checkers Cricket Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. From across the border, we have our veteran cricket journalist Asif Khan, who has been writing in national Pakistan dailies and has recently launched his very own popular YouTube channel with West Indian legend Michael Holding. Welcome, Asif bhai, to Pie Checkers Cricket Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
And last but not the least, our very own Chetan Narula from India. Chetan is one of the most accessible Indian journalists over Twitter. He has his very own podcast called Hotspot, of which the season 2 has just released. You can ask him all things cricket, Formula 1, Game of Thrones, but just don't ask him about the weather. Welcome, Chetan, to Pie Checkers Cricket Podcast.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. And just to update you, the weather is really unbearable in India right now. It's so humid. So that's the last thing I will say about weather today.
And just a small confession. I think of last year's India-Pakistan match, one of the several tweets which you had received, one of all those people, one of them was from Shivam Bhatia, who was pestering you with the weather forecast.
There's so many tweets that it just so many. It was a lot of fun. I mean, whenever it's India versus Pakistan, I put out that hashtag weatherman for a day. So, that's one day you should answer all the weather queries. And, whenever it's India, Pakistan in England, then the hashtag actually comes to a lot of use because the weather in England is, especially when cricket is on. So it was useful and it's quite great fun.
Sumer, you have been through all what is happening from the ICC guidelines and regulation perspective. So would you like to take us through what's happening on that front?
Yes, a lot has been said and has been out from ICC in the last 1 month or so. Many guidelines, ICC has issued a series of guidelines, in fact, to address the ball management, umpires and DRS, substitutions, preparation and workload, and other such normal cricketing or management-related guidelines. Now, before we go into more specific cricket-related guidelines, we want to start with more general and personnel guidelines that have been issued, for example, and maybe these could be useful in our discussions later, to the extent that people are asked to have 1.5 meter distance or the applicable local law, not to wear, or not to hand over personal items like sunglasses and sweaters and so on to umpires. Umpires themselves have to take care and maybe wear a glove when handling the ball. And it's also strongly discouraged to have any body contact during any celebrations and so on and so forth, also while sharing any drinks. And overall, another sort of rule or not a rule, actually, a guideline is to have a biosecure environment around the players and the coaching and the intimate staff that is around the playing 11. Those are some of the more general and personnel related guidelines that have been issued or have been talked about.
Well, talking about biosecure, now, George, do you think biosecure environment, is it even possible? Is it even practically possible, creating a biosecure environment in a place like England, or how do you feel about it?
Pretty much stopped using that phrase. They're now using the phrase behind closed doors, which is probably more accurate. No, it can't be biosecure in the way that a medical lab could be. But actually, I remember Ashley Giles, who's the managing director of England men's cricket, saying a few weeks ago he wanted to create an environment which was safer than going shopping. Well, I think they've done that, and I really do think the Test series between England and West Indies will probably go ahead, and that bubble is probably one of the most healthy places in the UK right now. And for that reason, I can sort of understand the Pakistan team seemed to want to get to the UK as quickly as possible, didn't they? Obviously, what was it? 10 of that touring party have tested positive COVID at this stage, and the others, I think, are flying out in the next 24, 48 hours. So I can understand why they're doing that, and I actually think they've done a really decent job of it so far. I know we haven't had any cricket yet, but it was a monstrously tough challenge, and I think we are going to have some cricket. I think I'm going to be there, by the way. The demands are quite onerous for the players in particular. They've all bought into it. Fantastic. I think, credit where it's due. They've done a really good job, and I applaud the West Indies and Pakistan for agreeing to come to the UK at a time when news reports might have made that seem quite an intimidating proposition. So I hope that the ECB and everyone in England are very respectful and grateful to those teams for coming. So they're sure doing us a favour.
Given that we've talked about the biosecure environment, Asif bhai, do you feel that ball management, that ICC has said that there will be no saliva usage, they can only use sweat, and then they've also said that there'll be 2 warnings that will be given. They've asked the umpires to be a bit lenient to start with, but then there is a 5-run penalty post 2 warnings. So Asif bhai, do you think the saliva ban was even needed given the biosecure or the closed doors that George mentioned they're talking about? Do you think biosecure bubble is there, then saliva ban was needed?
This particular point is actually a point of concern. I was having a word with Michael Holding, one of the finest bowlers you all know. And when we talked about this biosecure environment that was coming up, I'm talking about May. We were discussing this in May. And he was of the opinion even then that if the environment has been secured enough, then the bowlers and the fielders should be allowed to do whatever to do with the ball. Because this is one confusing aspect. It will kill the beauty of test match, or at least would hurt it a great deal. You must have heard a few noises from the companies that manufactures balls, like Kookaburra in Australia and Duke in the UK. They must come forward and at least introduce something to apply on the ball. If it is not the saliva, then a grease or a Vaseline or something or the other. I don't know about the weather. If the weather is hot enough, then precipitation will be there. But people have started, saying a lot about this magical thing, saliva. People are saying that if saliva is not applied, the ball will not swing in that fashion. So a lot to actually look into, and I think umpires would not go that severe in the time to come. If a bowler or a fielder does something unintentionally, I don't think that he will be penalized that harshly. And I don't see these 5 runs given or something. I even am anticipating that something gonna happen either after this series or after the Pakistan series. They got to sit down. They got to make around something, make something out of it. It will definitely kill the essence of fast bowling, kill the essence of test match cricket. So they have to do something.
Definitely. given how instinctive a lot of players, a lot of bowlers are to use their saliva on the ball, a lot of it may have to be very, very lenient to start off with. So, Chetan, how do you feel about it? I mean, do you actually think, like Asif bhai mentioned, that it'll create an imbalance that is already probably existent, even more? I mean, the balance between batsmen and bowlers. How do you see this, Chetan? Because
I
of
think
this move of ICC of banning saliva?
I think it's an interesting question, really, because this balance we're talking about, it is uh, off late. It is a little non-existent in Test cricket, because I personally believe that we are in an era of Test cricket where bowlers are actually doing really well. I mean, if you look at Australian attack, or the Indian attack, or the Pakistani attack, England attack, I mean, all these bowling attacks, even for the South African attack for that matter, I mean, whenever a team is playing away from home, they're struggling. So we are in an era where batsmen are actually struggling a little bit. Maybe it's not Virat Kohli, maybe not Steve Smith or David Warner, Kane Williamson. I mean, these are great batsmen, but overall, top order batsmen everywhere are struggling a bit. So, in fact, this decision might actually take it back in the favor of batsmen. That's what I personally think. I'm not sure saliva is the only way you can shine up the ball and work on it and get reverse swing. And I mean, it's not just about reverse swing, is it? I mean, there's conventional swing in England. How many times have you seen reverse? I mean, yes, you've seen great series when the ball goes old and everything. But if the weather conditions are right, I mean, James Anderson, Stuart Broad, I mean, they can just use conventional swing, and West Indies fast bowlers or Pakistan fast bowlers. So I think just the saliva bit is a bit overrated. You can use a bit of sweat. You can just shine one side of the ball. I mean, players work so hard on the ball that their kits go red. I mean, it just can't be saliva. It just can't only be saliva. But having said that, if the authorities do feel that that we need an external something to rub on the ball, maybe they should come out with something like a Vaseline or something that can be used uniformly across all international cricket for a particular period of time, say 1 year or 2 years, as long as this saliva ban is there. But apart from that, I think it's this whole talk about just saliva being so instrumental in reversing the ball. I think that's a bit overrated.
May I come back in here for a second?
Yeah.
Okay. I think one of the things that might be important to remember, that in England anyway, the agreement to restart the game has been made in conjunction with the government. So I think it would be a mistake to think of the game as deciding these regulations entirely. And it is the government who have a problem with saliva. So I don't think the game would restart if they use saliva. And personally, if I'm looking ahead to the future of cricket, I think this might be a game changer in terms of, I don't particularly see this virus going away quickly. If it does go away, it might well come back in a slightly different form. We may have to say goodbye to saliva. It might be the end of it. It's just gone. So they're going to have to find other ways.
Fair enough. So
and sweat is absolutely fine. The Duke's ball will swing both conventionally and reverse with sweat and just hard work.
In fact, just if I can just add on here, George, if you, I mean, last year when, not last year, last to last year when India were touring England, and Ravi Ashwin had a good, I wouldn't say he had a fantastic England tour, but he had a good England tour. And one of the things that actually he said after that England tour was, let's make Duke's ball the ball throughout Test cricket. Let's do away with SG ball and the Kookaburra and everything. So if you use the Duke's ball, whether you're playing in India, you're playing in Australia or England, if you work hard on the ball, there's conventional swing to be found. The ball is going to do something throughout the innings, throughout the 80 odd overs that it's available. So I think that could be one of the solution, because, and George is of course right, that it's the government who said that you can't use saliva. And I'm personally of the opinion that once cricket restarts, everybody would want to restart cricket, seeing how it has been restarted in England, which is a very, very crucial thing. So if it is not being used in England, it probably won't be used in India or Australia. I mean, the same rule would apply everywhere.
Fair enough. Now, George, since you mentioned that you do not see COVID going away too soon, and it is there to last, and you don't see this change reversing anytime soon, do you think pink ball, as a matter of fact, gains too much importance now, or should Test cricket move primarily to ball cricket now, given that it continually swings and helps bowlers?
Well, I should say I'm no expert on the health side of things, but all I would say is people do talk about finding the vaccine with, as if it's just going to happen. And haven't people been looking for a vaccine for AIDS for 40 years or something, and haven't found one yet? So I'm no expert. I'm a cricket journalist, but I wouldn't presume that everything's going to go back to the way it was. I think, what do I know? But it is possible that life's changed forever. And life's actually changed in another way as well, in that I think public tastes may have changed, and that the appetite for very high scoring test matches and draws over 5 days has probably gone. Certainly my appetite for that has gone. I would much rather see 200 v 180 rather than 700 v 600. And personally, I think that very flat wickets, and you'll remember the Trent Bridge test between England and India a few years ago. Yes. Many of the test wickets in New Zealand that I'm afraid I've sat through. The Nagpur test match in 2012. You can think of quite a lot of Adelaide test matches as well. I think those wickets are too flat, and I think they create
Melbourne off late.
Oh, Melbourne, we had a shocker there, didn't we? That was horrific. That's a brilliant example. But look, you can think of them all around the world, so I'm not criticising one country or another. And part of the issue with the pink ball is it doesn't do very much. It goes very soft, both the Dukes and the Kookaburra. It doesn't swing, goes very soft, and it creates quite attritional cricket. Well, I don't think that's the future. I don't have a lot of faith in that connecting with a new audience. So although day-night cricket is a lot of fun in some places, not in England, but in some places, I think they've got to try and play it with a red ball, or improve the technology. And at the moment, I don't think the pink ball works. I think it creates quite dull cricket, if I'm honest. And I'm not sure personally that the Kookaburra is to my taste either. But generally, as a general rule, I think the game, the long format game, the test format and first class, is slightly more entertaining when the ball just holds a little bit of extra power over the bat. Just a little bit. You still want to get the balance about right. But I think 700 v 600 will kill the game. I really do. I think that flat pitches are as big a danger as test cricket faces. So let's not do anything that negates the power of the bowler. Because I say again, at least in the longest formats, I think the ball should be slightly on top. And I think that's exactly the opposite. The shorter the format, the more, I think, the bat should hold dominance. But it's just a view.
This ban on saliva would create changes in how teams composition of the 11 that the teams do, basically. Do you feel that basically you see more all-rounders being played because of more bowlers being needed due to flattish surfaces, and even lesser swing due to non-use of saliva? Do you think that, Asif bhai?
I think nothing can be said with certainty at this point in time, because we are looking forward to watching the game that is coming up between England and the West Indies. Is the benchmark, sort of. We will see a lot of things in that. In the West Indian lineup, we have seen that they have employed a number of fast bowlers, which means that they are also foreseeing something good with the Duke's cricket ball. Basically, Duke and the Kookaburra. Then there will be a quarrel between these two manufacturers will start. And Duke, as George very well know, that Duke is Duke because of the pronounced seam of it. And because of that seam, it gives this much assistance to bowlers like James Anderson. That's why he has had 80% of his wickets on those wickets. on those surfaces. So this is a very good debate that should we uniform the use of ball or the type of ball, but it will then create a sort of a rift between two giants of manufacturers like Kookaburra and Duke and all.
Moving on, I think George, do you think this was a good time to legalize ball tampering?
That's a good question. Depends what you mean. I actually think the laws are pretty good. I think that I quite often hear players say, "Oh, the laws are a bit unclear," and I've asked them a couple of times, "Well, have you actually read them?" And they go, "No." So, for example, do you remember when Faf du Plessis got done for putting
The mint gate?
the mint? Look, it was pretty clear he was wrong. You're allowed to have a mint in your mouth, yeah? And you're allowed to have the mint here and take the saliva from here, or you used to be able to, and put it on the ball. That's absolutely legal. What you're not allowed to do is directly transfer from the mint. Now, the laws make this really clear. You just got to read them, really. There are a couple of details which I think the umpires could look at again. I don't really see the problem with throwing the ball in on the bounce. To me, that takes a little bit of skill. In the same way that bowling scrambled seam it requires a little bit of skill. If you get it wrong, several times, you have ruined both sides of the ball, and you're bowling just with an old dog toy, aren't you?
Fair enough.
So, I personally wouldn't like to see bottle tops or sandpaper. I think the game still has to be about skill. And let's see what happens with the saliva thing. But what you tend to find is that bowlers find a way. Very good bowlers find a way. And in the same way that Wasim Akram or Kapil Dev or Jimmy Anderson would have swung any ball, Kookaburra, Dukes, SG, anything, any condition, they'll find a way. So you don't want to make it too easy. I suppose we might be at the start of a new phase, and we might want to look at what happens in the next few years, if this really is the beginning of a new era. But I wouldn't rush into allowing them to ball tamper when you just take a little bit of the skill out of it. Just go back a few years, that the UK media, and I'm very much so before my time, were hugely distrusting of reverse swing. And there may even been a bit of racism about the behind the view that, you know, if these bowlers are making the ball do that, they must be cheating. And it just turned out that they were brilliant. And then England learned to do it. And now, when the Australians whisper, we just dismiss it as nonsense. And it was the same, actually, with mystery spin. England distrusted it until they found a couple of people who could do it. And I think that logic sustains for this area as well, which is that moving the ball, doing what people like Jimmy Anderson and Dale Steyn can do, is wonderful. Let's not cheapen it by making it too easy. Let's see how it goes for a bit and not change something that's worked actually quite well for 150 years or whatever. So let's just keep an open mind as we go forward, I think.
Yeah, I'm pretty glad you talked about players not reading or not being aware of the rules completely. I mean, I read just yesterday, I think that Ross Taylor confessed he wasn't sure or he didn't know about it, that the World Cup final, if it was a tie, there was a super over, it was going to happen. I mean, he said, I just walked up to the umpire and I wanted to say good game, but then I realized that there is a super over that is to be had. So yeah, definitely, you make a fair point there.
I don't know, there's just been a book published, which I've got here, about England's World Cup win. I haven't read it yet. I've just been sent it. But I do know that during the World Cup, the final few minutes of the World Cup, Trevor Bayliss, the England coach, told me this, I think. One of the support umpires, can't remember which one, well, I do, I remember his name, but I can't remember which role it was, so I won't name him, told England the tiebreaker and got it wrong. So, to be fair, there are moments when the playing regulations or laws, the playing regulations more often, are quite complicated and may differ from the normal laws. so that it's completely legitimate to need to check and to get things wrong occasionally, but it does show that even at the very end of these huge games, very experienced people can get it wrong. Actually, that World Cup final that was played in Barbados in 2007, the umpires got that wrong too, didn't they? They came back on, didn't they? It was a ridiculous situation. Yeah, so that's 2 World Cup finals we've thought of right there, where the umpires have got it wrong right at the end. But, just the point being that sometimes the laws of our wonderful game can be a little bit confusing. So I guess we cut people some slack. But in terms of ball tampering, just to go back to the thing, I think what's already there is actually, it kind of works. And I wouldn't want to throw it out just yet.
Fair enough. Chetan, now that you mentioned that you feel that pace bowlers have been dominating, we've been reading all about it, how so many pace bowlers have averages in mid-20s or low 20s. You're right on that. But then now that you see the balance shifting towards the batsman a bit, do you think that Sachin mentioned in one of his interviews recently that maybe change a ball every 45 overs in Test cricket? Do you feel, would that be a solution? What do you think? I mean, could be a solution, could be an alternative?
Well, I mean, if I say that Sachin Tendulkar is saying something that is, that doesn't work for cricket, I don't think anybody would allow me to work in cricket anymore. However, I should say that I sort of disagree with him on this, that, when you say that, okay, let's introduce a new ball altogether after 45 overs, you're changing the texture of the game, you're changing the complexion of the game. I mean, Test cricket has such a long history where, one ball has to last. I mean, yes, there was a point at some point that rule was introduced, okay, that you have a new ball after every 80 overs. And of course, now you have DRS and this and that. So many new rules every time. And of course, like George said, we are entering a whole, era of the unknown here. So lots of changes. But 45 overs is what, 1.5 sessions, to be honest. Yes. I mean, if Ravindra Jadeja is bowling from one end, that's 1.5 sessions of Test cricket. So 45 overs, that could have a huge impact on, how the game progresses. A new ball after every 45 overs, maybe reduce it to 70, maybe 60. I'm not sure. Again, like I said, you can't really say Sachin Tendulkar is wrong. However, just to add on to what George was saying earlier, that yes, we have to look at it from a perspective that what happens if we don't find a vaccine? What happens if the virus doesn't go away on its own? So, and of course, to his point that people don't have the appetite for high-scoring Test matches. To that end, why not? Maybe this is the time to experiment further, take the 4-day Test match experiment a bit further, because if the wicket is flat and you know that one team is going to end up scoring 500 and 600 and then try and bowl the other team out, especially when they can't apply saliva on the ball, if it is a 4-day Test match, then nobody's going to bat until they have 600 on the board. They'll have to be satisfied with 300, 350, because at the end of the day, wins will matter. Nobody's going to switch on television sets and say, okay, 4-day Test match ending in a draw or, getting rained off. Nobody wants to watch that. So a 4-day Test match, even if there's no saliva, even if the pitch is a little flat, I think that it is a time that we can experiment with that. Say, okay, instead of changing the ball at 80 overs, change it at 70 overs. And, let's have a 4-day Test match. So you change the ball at 70 overs, you're bowling 110 overs a day. So you get 2 new balls to bowl in a day. And a 4-day Test match, I mean, you could get a good result.
Completely agree with Chetan. I just wonder whether Sachin's got shares in ball making companies. It's a mad idea, really, because you're basically taking reverse swing largely and spin out of the game. It's it's one of the skill. I mean, you're changing the game a lot if you do that. I don't really know where that came from.
I think Sachin was just trying a few left field ideas, maybe. And talking about 4-day cricket, I mean, given we're not able to get 90 overs in a day, I mean, you will need 4 Ravindra Jadejas, I feel, Chetan, bowling in tandem to get 100 or 110 overs in a day.
I think, no, I mean, I mean, the over rates will suffer. Over rates will have to change. They'll have to bowl quicker. I think in a 4-day Test match, the sessions are a bit longer. I'm not sure. I mean, in a domestic match, first class match, when you bowl for when you have 4-day matches, 90 to 110, especially in England in county cricket, if I'm not wrong, because I'm playing, cricket manager all the time on my phone, so I have to bowl 110 overs a day. In that.
Not,
So
not anymore. Not anymore.
not
So,
anymore. Okay, so I need to
in the
update
old
my
days-
game.
Yeah,
Yeah, I need to update my game.
When I was 10 or so and started to
Okay.
go to county cricket, they bowled 122 or something a day.
Yeah. So even
But
if
the standard was pretty mediocre, because you ended up with lots of very flat spinners. You ended up with Jadeja bowling 50 overs a day, basically, which is not really what you want. You want it to.
No.
We had a
No.
4-day test, of course, against England v Ireland at Lords, and it worked quite well. I think the key thing is you can't look at bowling more overs. It's just not going to happen. It's unrealistic. You're not going to get Shannon Gabriel to get through his overs quicker. It's just not going to happen. But what you could do is ensure the pitches were a bit more helpful to bowlers again. If the ball and the pitches are suitable, there is probably a time and a place for 4-day cricket. You don't need to do it in the Ashes. You don't necessarily need to do it when England and India and Australia meet, because those games will sell just fine. But maybe for some other tests and some other test series, that might be worth thinking about. But you have to get the pitches and the ball right. Because if you have high-scoring 4-day draws, you're just killing test cricket.
Fair enough. I think enough of saliva talk. Sumer, maybe you'd like to take it forward now.
Sure. Thank you, Shivam and Chetan and George and Asif bhai. It was actually an insightful discussion. So we want to now move on to our next topic of discussion, which is around changes to the game, especially in relation to the umpires. The guideline is to not mandate people having non-neutral umpires. So basically, you can have sort of local umpires in the game and do with it, of course, to logistically make the game more easy to manage. Now, having said that, we used to have a lot of such kind of arrangements where local umpires would also officiate, in earlier years. Do you think, Chetan, I'll start with Chetan, do you think that overall the umpiring quality is going to not be as good? Remember when in 80s and 90s we had no ICC panels? It looks like we are probably moving to that era again. What do you think, Chetan?
Okay, first of all, no, I mean, the umpiring standards in the 70s, 80s were pretty horrendous. I mean, you look at Sunil Gavaskar not agreeing with the decision, LBW decision, and having an issue with the umpire giving him out and having a fight with Australian Pacers, or maybe you should just read up about India-Pakistan series in the 70s and 80s, and the umpiring was horrific. So we are nowhere near that level, let me just assure you. However, having said that, yes, I would not say the umpiring today is bad, because, I mean, come on, everybody has a bad day at his job, and it's not easy checking the no ball line every time. I think last year when the TV umpires started taking note of the no balls, I think that was a marvelous introduction in terms of umpiring in the game. Having said that, what really irks me every time, it just irritates me so much, that every time there's a stumping call or a run out call, the umpire will just do this. Even if the batsman is in by half a mile, the umpire will just do this. So what we need is to hold the umpires culpable for the decisions they make. If the player's match fee can be docked, if the players can be given demerit points, we also need to start docking match fees of umpires and match referees, as well as giving them demerit points. Because if you give them demerit points and they are taken off the elite panel, then it creates a vacancy, and then you need to fill the vacancy. So by promotion relegation, you're having a larger panel of umpires. But again, for me, it is about holding the umpires culpable for the decisions that they make. They just, I mean, the batsman is halfway down the crease, and you just can't do this and ask the third umpire to say, okay, he's out or not out. You just can't do that. No way.
What you're saying is there still is promise, and it's just that umpires need to be slightly pushed in that direction.
Yeah, so right now nobody is pushing the umpires. I mean, there is no check in terms of like George was alluding to the World Cup final. It was not just about the tiebreaker that the umpires had it wrong. In fact, uh, one of the umpires or one of the ex-umpires spoke about it in the media. The overthrow of Ben Stokes was given a boundary. It should never have been given a boundary. So you don't give it a boundary. The match is never tied. You don't go to 2 super overs, and the whole shenanigans don't happen. And New Zealand win a World Cup. So leaving that aside, did anybody ask the umpires, why didn't you know the rule? Okay, fine, heat of the moment, but it's now happened, as George pointed, in 2 World Cup finals.
Nice.
And the ODI World Cup is the pinnacle of ODI World Cup final is the pinnacle game of cricket, in fact. So nobody is holding the umpires or the match referees accountable. I think we need to start docking them fees or giving them demerit points. We really need to have a check on the umpires.
Right. And having said that, there still is a talk around the fact that, especially in the subcontinent, more so in India and Bangladesh, there is, a dearth of the ICC panel, of the umpires from the ICC panel. We have, I guess, one from from Pakistan, though, but we are okay in terms of Australia and
One
South
from
Africa
India as
and
well.
England. Yeah.
One from India as well.
From India. And,
Yeah.
do you see slightly less balanced, approach there? Not approach, actually. Do you see a less balance overall? And do you know the reason behind it, Chetan?
I'm not sure if I know the exact reason behind it, because I mean there are so many umpires in domestic cricket, club cricket. Everybody wants to make a mark. It's not easy to become an umpire. You have to pass a lot of examinations, get a lot of experience to even to get in the BCCI panel for Ranji Trophy. Forget the ICC elite panel. I mean that's like a mountain that you need to climb. I'm not saying it can't be done. It can be done, but yes, Indian cricket especially needs a structured focus on cultivating a new panel of umpires. I mean, the other thing, obviously, I mean, if you see a lot of the umpires that are coming from, say, Sri Lanka or Pakistan or Australia, quite a few of them sometimes can be ex-players as well. So are a lot of ex-players in India or in subcontinent countries or even in Australia, England, are they interested in becoming umpires anymore? Because becoming a broadcaster sitting on Star Sports and Fox Sports and Sky Sports and earning a lot of money, I think that's a much more lucrative. Option. So we need to figure out a structured manner in which we also bring up umpires and not just focus on cricketers alone. And in fact, with the rules now changing, that a lot of home umpires will be used in international cricket, because you can't have elite ICC umpires traveling because of the travel regulations. So maybe this might just be a boon for the umpiring umpiring standards in international cricket.
Just a short answer for this one. So are you suggesting that the structure of the domestic cricket in India is slightly diverse and more complex, therefore to get to the ranks even at BCCI level is difficult? That's why people in India are not sort of, it's not so easy to get there as, for example, opposed to in England and Australia?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean,
okay.
Yes, we have 20, 25 teams in our Ranji Trophy structure, but what about the structure below that, the club structure, the college structure? I mean, it's a wilderness. I mean, yes, you have Australia. I mean, you look at Australia and England, their club culture is properly defined. Their coaching structure, their umpiring structures are properly defined. Today in India, anybody can open a cricket academy. I mean, especially if you're a famous name. So coaching certification perhaps is not that necessary to open a cricket academy in India, or to just have a club going. But if you look at Australia or England, or maybe even South Africa for that matter, it's much more structured. And I think from a grassroots level, we not only umpiring but also coaching. You talk about ex-cricketers getting into coaching. Some of them go for certification. A lot of them don't go for certification.
That then brings me to one more aspect of this guideline, which is, we talk about poor quality and so on. The ICC has given a green light to having one more DRS per innings in these games post COVID. Now that's an interesting sort of move forward. However, given the fact that there was already some talk going on around having another DRS anyway in the test, do you think this will address that? Having one more will address the fact that there's probably a gap? A. B. If so, are we overall undermining the influence of the on-field umpire overall, George?
Probably. I mean, there's so much here. I don't think anyone thinks, having these local umpires, that there is going to be bias necessarily. I don't think that's what people are worried about. It's the perception. It is showing that you have done everything to make sure that the decision making is free of bias. So that's why you want neutral umpires. And personally, I don't think we should go back there. I can see how it's desperately unfortunate if you are, say, an English umpire who never gets to stand at Lords in a test. That's really, really rough.
Mm-hmm.
But the greater good is that you don't want to go back to the days where even if an honest umpire made an honest mistake, there was then the perception that there could be some sort of corruption or bias, even subconscious bias involved. So we just can't go back there. It was rubbish. We've been there, we've done it, we've moved on. There's lots of reasons why there are lots of quite good English umpires. I can't really speak for other countries, but the Professional Cricketers Association, the union, the players, has pretty much used it as a development tool so that cricketers retiring, quite young, can move into a secondary career quite quickly. So they are promoted very quickly if they're good. So you get young men at the moment, there's absolutely no reason why women shouldn't be international umpires at that level as well. That will happen, no doubt, quite shortly. But it means you've got young people with young people's reflexes, and perhaps also with decent relationships with the players, so they understand the modern tensions in the game and they can work with them in the way that someone like Murray Erasmus is so good. Maybe not the best decision maker, but brilliant at diffusing tension and ensuring the game keeps going. So that's why there are some quite good English umpires, because it's been part of the development system and they've promoted talent quite quickly. So look, I'm not particularly worried about the local umpires here. I'm not particularly worried about DRS. I think it's inevitable that will happen more. I think it will just mean that fielding captains will probably gamble a bit more. Opening batsmen will probably gamble a bit more. It'll be used as another tactic. There are criteria by which the umpires are measured already. I can tell you. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to work out that they're in a bit of a group. But Joel Wilson is a long way behind. Is it unfair to name him? Yeah, probably. That's why the ICC don't, because they don't want to, lampoon a guy who's doing his best but might not be up to it. But the fact is, there are criteria, and he may have to be cut adrift because he's we all live in a meritocracy, and he's not really doing it. And now we all understand that good umpires make mistakes. I mean, they're human.
Okay.
And we've got to be understanding of that. But I don't think that DRS slows down the game too much. I actually think the crowd in the stadium quite enjoy it. On TV, it can be a bit slow. I don't know. Look, the game is so professional. There's so much money involved. There's so much importance in getting the decisions right that it's inevitable that there's going to be a bit more reliance on technology and an ever decreasing amount of power in the on-field umpire's hands. Is it a bit sad? Yeah. Does the game change? Absolutely. Not really either better or worse. It's just a bit different.
Funny that you mentioned opening batsmen and DRS. I mean, Watson would have loved to play in this era of 3 DRS. He would have loved it.
He could have used them all in the first over, couldn't he? I mean, absolutely brilliant. Whether batting or bowling, brilliant.
Right. Here, I'd like to have Asif's point noted as well. I'd like to understand from Pakistan's perspective, okay? And this is maybe a connection to what Chetan earlier said, which was the structure of the the structure of the domestic format um, has sort of been a bottleneck, if I may call it that. Now, how Pakistan overall has not played so much cricket at home in the last 10 years or so, yet have produced very good umpires. What is your take on that? A, B, and how do you see the advent of technology more and more in the game influencing the umpiring? Quickly there.
Basically, that element of biasness, I think, should not be counted upon much now, because time has changed. You have at least 25, 26 cameras on the umpires. So the element of making a deliberate error is not possible, or it's highly unlikely. On Pakistan's part, yeah, Pakistan Cricket Board has a separate department to groom the umpires. They do carry out tests. They do carry out certifications and all. And we have umpires like Aleem Dar is, everyone knows Aleem Dar, and then there is Ehsan Raza. He's a very very good umpire, and they both are from a cricketing array. Like they are first class players, ex first class players. So people are going there. Young people are going there in two fields. One is the match referee field, and the other one is the umpiring field. People are in Pakistan are taking it seriously, but still, as compared to the other job, like somebody else mentioned that holding a mic of a big broadcast is something which everyone wants to do, but everyone can't do that. So you have to do something else. But this umpiring is should be taken into consideration and should be taken seriously by ex-players, by other players in the Pakistan cricket setup. In the Pakistan cricket setup, as far as I know, because I checked the last time, I think you got to have some sort of a cricketing background or a cricketing experience to enter this field. I will double check it. I know for a fact that if you want to have coaching certification, for that you got to play at least a bunch of first class games. That I know, but is it applied on the umpiring aspect also? I got to check it. But as far as the people that I know who are in this umpiring, yes, they are former first class players. They are they are the first class players, former first class players. But people got to step in. And as Chetan was mentioning about the Indian first class system, here in Pakistan, the number of games have shrunk. Now, since the last season, the total number of first class games are 30-31. 30-31 means, and we have about 5-6 venues. So more or less about 20-22 people are engaged in a first class season. Top umpires. In Pakistan cricket, Pakistan Cricket Board has its own elite panel of umpires. Then there is a lower grade. Then there is a lower grade. Then there is so this sort of tables or this sort of steps are there to be an elite umpire in the country. To be the elite umpire in the country.
Perfect. Great.
Yeah, just want to add. If I can, just want to add on Asif's point. It's not like the Indian. Don't get me wrong. It's not like the Indian structure of umpiring and all. It's not well structured, or the BCCI doesn't regulate, and the Ranji umpires or the club umpires, they don't need to pass exams and everything. No, they do. I mean, BCCI is very stringent in that regard. They have regular examinations. I mean, you have to take courses, in fact, if you want to do umpiring at the Ranji Trophy. What I was suggesting was that while it is structured in a regular sort of way, there is not enough focus on cultivating a higher level or a higher breed of high quality umpires. I mean, right now we have 3 or 4 international level umpires and only 1 in the ICC elite panel. A country like India, which is fueling the world cricket economy, where IPL is the biggest showpiece in world cricket right now. The Indian team is the biggest eyeball grabber in world cricket right now. Why are there so few elite ICC elite umpires? So that's what I'm asking for, a bigger focus on cultivating more elite level umpires. The structure is
All right.
there in place. It is a very good structure. It's just that a little more focus, a little more spotlight, and make the umpiring job, that people can aspire to. Not everybody wants to be an umpire, cricket umpire in India. Everybody wants to play cricket. Everybody wants to do commentary, become a journalist, wants to do podcasts. Nobody wants to become an umpire.
All right. Okay. So people need to see umpiring as they would see batting in India. Okay. Good. Now that let's move along and talk about a slightly different aspect of the post-COVID cricket, which is the substitution. It has been said that there will be a like-for-like substitution in cases of COVID-like illnesses. And it's sort of like a concussion kind of a rule. The match referee will approve such a change. And my question is sort of general, but I'd start with George here. My point to understand is, how do you see the game continuing? For example, if a certain...
I don't see it works. It doesn't work. The difference is concussion. Obviously, you don't pass on to anyone you breathe upon. There's no contagious element to concussion. Surely, if someone gets it, everyone they've been in the dressing room with is going to be taken into isolation as well.
Right.
So
Okay.
I just don't see how it works. I'm afraid if this happens, the game's over. So that's why they've been extremely cautious. Look, even as media, I think there are 12 of us written media who are allowed to go to these games. And certainly in Manchester, everywhere actually, we're separated. Obviously, we've got 2 meters apart in the rooms. We're not allowed to use the press box. We're in a specific room. But in Manchester, we're 2 in each room, which means that if one of us goes down or even has a high temperature, only the other person has to leave as well. But anyone we've been into contact with would not be allowed to go in, would they? That's how it works. You would surely have to go into isolation. I don't see them taking any chances. I just don't see how they could. Because, and again, remember, it's not up to the cricketing authorities, it's up to the government. It was the government who decided that Pakistan won't be going to Birmingham, for example. It wasn't cricket. So I don't see that it's going to work. I like the idea in principle, but it is... I don't know. I mean, unless I'm being really dumb and not understanding something, and Lord knows there's precedent for that. But I just don't quite see how it's going to work if, first slip says, I'm not feeling very well. They have the temperature taken. They have a fever. Surely the wicketkeeper, second slip, they've gone too, haven't they? Or have I missed something? So unless you're going to allow half a dozen substitutions, and even then, they've been in contact with the umpires and the opposition. It doesn't work, does it? Am I missing something?
Right. Interesting point. Maybe a related question. So the advent of the 30-minute rapid testing. So if that is available, and I'm not really very sure if it's available in the next England and West Indies. Maybe, George, you have some information about it?
No, I don't. I know that I can't remember how it's within 24 hours you're getting the test results at the moment. And we're getting screened at least twice a day. I mean, as a journalist, we'll get tested. I get tested next week. I think we get tested every 5 days throughout the series. And we get screened at least twice a day just before we even sit down. And that's, I mean, I'm all for it. I feel very fortunate that they've let us in, actually. And also very fortunate they try to look after everybody. And the bigger picture is that to get the game on and to retain any sort of financial credibility going forward, these games have to be played. We have to jump through a lot of hoops, and that's absolutely right. But I don't see, even if the test results were 30 minutes, what do? Do we stop for 30 minutes? Well, no, really, do we? And what, imagine it's 9 wickets down. England are batting for a draw. Jack Leach is there doing what he does, and he suddenly goes, you know what? I'm feeling a bit hot. Well, what happens? We call it a draw. I'm not suggesting he would. He's not that guy. We've seen him. He's a hero, isn't he? But you can see how there could be the perception of misuse.
Interesting.
Anyway,
very interesting.
I'm open-minded. They seem to have thought of an answer for everything so far. I genuinely think I'm very critical of the ECB very often, and very often with good reason. I could not praise them enough for getting this on in the current circumstances. You know, things in England have not been good. There's a lot of cases. Quite a lot of people have died. I mean, 50,000 or more people are dead. It's a big deal, yeah? And they've got international cricket on. They have persuaded people from the Caribbean, where there's some of these islands haven't had very, very few cases, and they've got them to fly into England. It's amazing. So they deserve a lot of credit for that. But I don't see how this bit works.
Right, and I remember there was already some discussion with the medical committee and the ICC's cricket committee, which is held by is basically managed by Anil Kumble. They already discussed this in the meeting, and still sense didn't prevail. That sort of I'm not sure what to call it, but what do you think? I mean, what happened that ICC could not really have a proper or a sensible guideline out there, or did they just had a brain freeze or something?
You asking me?
Yeah.
Well, I look, in a perfect world, I guess there could be a scenario where it helps. So there could be a scenario where someone wakes up in the morning and doesn't come out of the hotel room and says, "Do you know what? I'm not feeling very well," and they decide that they can carry on the game. I mean, maybe. Personally, I'd be surprised, because presumably they've been in contact with people the day before, and I just can't see them taking risks. I mean, imagine they said, "Okay, we'll take, say, Jimmy Anderson out of the attack. We'll replace him with, say, Chris Wokes, and then, Stuart Broad goes down the next day and is dangerously ill a week later." I mean, they're not going to take that chance. So maybe there is a potential situation where it could be of help. But, if I just run you through some of those potential scenarios, it's quite hard to see it, isn't it?
I'd like to move on and then talk about slightly, related topic about media presence. You talked about not just cricketers. I'll start with Asif. So how do you see, for example, the management of the media being done? For example, especially as a source of potential infection, right? Are there any enforcements, and maybe George as well can comment on this, are there any enforcements on the media front? What are you supposed to do and not do? Do you have some information to give us around that?
Basically, what's going to happen there in England, I have no idea, but the rule is simple. Everyone has to follow the SOPs. Everyone has to avoid the chance of getting infected. This is the rule. A cricketer, media person, umpire, commentator, or whoever you are, you got to be looked through the same lens, I would say, of that security, of that biosecurity apparatus which has been set up. This is for everyone, be it a cricketer, be it a media person, or anybody. George was saying that in some cases only 2 people are allowed in one room. So these are the measures that are to be taken. But the forefront, the foremost concern is to get safe.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Okay. Then about the media presence and overall, the taste of the game. So because there are no celebrations allowed, or at least there's no body touching, no crowds specifically, and potentially less sledging, perhaps, in the game. Now, is the final product that we will watch in 2 weeks going to be slightly inferior, at least for people who are watching it from their TV sets inside their homes? And also there have been sort of talks. So because there are people who like to have crowd behind them. Shoaib Akhtar has already talked a lot about it, and VK likes it as well. I'm talking about Virat Kohli. So are TV broadcasters doing anything? Is there any initiative? And I know Sky has talked about having like team-specific crowd, chants and so on and so forth. How do you see that impacting the game overall, especially for viewers who are also maybe for people watching the game, playing the game? Would they like no crowds, and how would it turn out for people outside the stadiums? Maybe George can start, and then
Right,
you
okay.
can take it.
If you allow me to
Yes,
add
please.
something in that,
Yes,
basically,
please.
and George can basically relate to that as well. George, do you remember that 2012 series, Pakistan versus England in the UAE 3-0? You remember that?
Of course, and I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, but we witnessed empty stadiums. So we have been witnessing that since I think 2009 to be exact. If you ask a Pakistani, so we have seen that all. We have gone through that all. It will not basically. I think it will not affect that much. Players will be concentrating on the game, and they will do what they do best.
George?
Well, spot on. We have experienced all this before. Even, England obviously are very lucky in that they take a lot of people abroad with them. I mean, it is unusual,
Yeah.
and the supporters are very vocal. But Asif's right. That series in the UAE was a really good example. But we've seen it happen other places. There were days in New Zealand, in particular, where the game was heading to a draw and it was a bit boring, and there's no one there. And I think that if you're going to be an international sports person, you have to be so competitive that you cannot help but be competitive. I don't think they would know how not to be competitive. So I think that once it starts, it might feel a bit strange. It might sound a bit different, but actually, I think we'll all get into it. And it would be naive, wouldn't it, to pretend that there aren't times when the crowd can help create an atmosphere. That those amazing days where the crowd noise is deafening, and it definitely can add to that sense of excitement. Okay, and that's gone. But it's really about the cricket, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I still think people watching on TV and the fact that Twitter or whatever the social media of choice is can help people talk in real time just about. I still think so. It'll be a bit different, but I still think it'll happen. There'll still be some atmosphere, and I don't think the players will miss it very often because, as I say, they are naturally incredibly competitive, and most of them will have played in environments where it's been extremely quiet, whether it's tour games. People exaggerate how few people go to county cricket, but they will have played on days when they haven't been, and they're professionals. And, they all understand what we're living through. We're living through a pandemic. These are extraordinary times. And they've got to get the game on. And they'll know that they're on TV. And they'll know that they're in a battle with the person who's got the bat or the ball. And I don't think it'll make a massive difference. But at the same time, it would be lovely to have crowds back whenever we can.
So, we've talked about the ICC guidelines. I think it's natural for us to also look at the players specifically and how they are impacted. If you consider the fact that almost all the international cricketers haven't played a competitive match in almost 3+ months, I believe we've seen in other sports like the Bundesliga, which is the first elite sports competition to come back, that elite athletes who are away from their game for a long time, when they come back, there's always a risk of injuries on the job. To that end, George, do you believe that England will be a little bit more proactive in terms of how they rotate their players, given the packed itinerary that is tentatively scheduled for this summer, and given the fact that you have very limited breaks between series? Could we see a situation in which a Jimmy is given off a match within the series?
It's a good question. Yes. I mean, he's quite an interesting example. How old is he? I mean, he's almost in the at-risk category. I think he has been injured in 2 of his last 3 tests, I think. Even the last one he played was the last one he played in Cape Town. He won it for England, but he was still injured at the end of it, and he bowled through his a rib injury or whatever. So yeah, I don't see any way that he'll get through. Well, they're 3 back-to-back tests, a tiny break, and then 3 back-to-back tests. So, and the other thing is, England surely at some stage need to look at continuity planning. So I would be very surprised if Shannon Gabriel played 3 back-to-back tests, for example, if Jimmy Anderson did, if any of them did, really. And I don't think they should. I don't think Jofra should. I don't think Mark Wood should. Jason Holder didn't bat, really. Oh, sorry, batted for 1 ball, and he didn't bowl at all in the warm-up match they've just had. So, it's hard to believe he's 100%, isn't it? We're asking a lot of them, yes. We're asking a bit too much of them. So it is important for their coaches to be responsible. And I'm very confident they will be. All I would say is England have said this about rotating Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad every summer since about 2010, or 2012, certainly. They did get rested for 1 game in 2012. Tino Best went and got 95. Shows me what happens. So you have to be mindful of the fact they've always said they're going to. And actually, how do you leave out Jimmy Anderson in English conditions? He's incredible, isn't he? So, but I think this year they will have to. And the points you raise are, it's spot on. It is a real worry for both sides. And it would be awful if these terrific athletes, hurt themselves in a way that, possibly could compromise their longevity in the game. Because someone like Shannon Gabriel, he's so big and so magnificent in full flight that you want to see him at 80%. You want to see him being that brilliant 100% fast bowler. So I hope that none of them are asked to play. None of the big fast bowlers, anyway, are asked to play all 3 of these tests in a row.
And, while we're on the Jimmy and Broad discussion, do you think that this break might have refreshed them in any way? I know that Jimmy has been facing a lot of injuries back to back, but can we expect to maybe see them tour India if there is a tour to India this year, and perhaps even the next Ashes?
I'll make a little bet with you now that that Test series between India and England isn't played in India. I would just as a bet. I bet you. I would think that goes ahead in the UAE. And if England play the limited overs section as they're planned to in September, they leave in September, October. I'll give you my firstborn child if that takes place. So I'm reasonably. That's no inside knowledge. That's just a bet. I just can't see that happening. Can you? Which is ridiculous because the IPL probably is going to go ahead at the same time. But there we are.
Chetan?
George, just here, which series are you talking about? India, England?
The Test series that is meant to start in January.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just saying as a bet, but by all means, take me up on it. I'll bet you a beer.
No,
I bet that's in the UAE. But I might be wrong.
I just wanted to check which series you were talking about because actually there's a lot of India-England cricket coming up in the next 12 to 15 months. So I just wanted to check which series you're talking about.
Far too much, and that's another point. There's actually 10 tests between India and England in what, 8-9 months? I mean,
no, 6 months. 6 months. I mean, you're looking at January last week to March first week. That's the 5 test matches, and then June last week or July first week, India is in England again for the 5 test matches. So
but presumably it finishes at August.
September. Yeah.
Okay.
So within a span of 6 to.
But the point is taken. They're going to play. I mean, how many times can I write Virat Kohli's really good?
It's an interesting point, George. You're saying that India playing a test series in the UAE. I know the Indian board has been a little bit strict, Chetan, on playing in non-traditional cricketing venues. I think a bit of it is a byproduct of the match fixing era, etc. They don't feel that the UAE is a particularly good place for the Indian team to be playing matches in. So I don't know if we can expect an India-England in UAE.
No, maybe there'll be 5 tests in Mumbai or something like that. No, genuinely, I think those are the sorts of possibilities. I would be really surprised if England play a 5-test series in India, bearing in mind what's going on. But I might be wrong. I'm just having to guess. And that was a ridiculous answer because you asked me about Jimmy Anderson, didn't you, or something? and I've just gone off on one about where the test will be in January. Ridiculous. Sorry.
No, I think very relevant point.
I can. Yeah. If. I mean, George could be right here. I mean, right now, I think every cricket board is searching for alternatives. Sri Lanka is an alternative, UAE is an alternative, and I'm just talking about the IPL here. I mean, because why I'm talking about the IPL is because as good as what George is saying, yes, you need to plan ahead for the international fixtures. Let me tell you, the BCCI is not even thinking about it. Let me just be categorical and just say the BCCI is not even thinking about it. There's only one thing that the BCCI is thinking about, and that is the IPL. Why? 5,000 crores a year from one IPL season. 5,000 crores and 5 test matches, which are what? Television only. People can't go to the stadium. Test matches not valued at all in terms of sponsorship, in terms of broadcast or anything. In fact, you look at India's tour of Australia, Cricket Australia. I mean, I'm sure you guys, George included, everybody has been following how much noise is coming out of Australia regarding India's tour of Australia. That's in November and December. Has anybody heard anything said from the BCCI or an Indian player about India's tour of Australia? Not one. Why? Because they are concentrated or they are focused only on one thing, hosting the IPL. I'm assuming the IPL will happen at some point this year if UAE is all very good because it's starting to open up in UAE. Once the IPL dates are set and the schedule is out and everything, then the BCCI might just start thinking about other things, about going to Australia, about inviting England over. There's a lot of money that will be lost if those matches aren't played. But let's just assume that, okay, things don't improve and the IPL doesn't happen. And then you can either host the IPL in February, March, things are still pacified and everything. So you can either host the IPL or you can host 5 test matches against England. What are you going to host? 5,000 crores versus what? 300 crores, maybe, if you're lucky. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer.
Except there are 16 countries in the T20 World Cup.
Yeah.
And 16 countries need the revenue from it. And yet, the IPL, which has effectively already had a window this year, is now basically asking for another window. They might not define it, but that's pretty much what's happening. And if they don't get it, they're going to want another one after that. So it's entirely possible they'll be given a window, which they then can't utilise. So they'll ask for a third window within 12 months. And then they'll get the fourth one in the normal season time next year. Now, is that from an Indian perspective, it's hugely lucrative. There might be quite a lot of fans, not just in India, but across the globe, who care about that more than anything else. There'll be a lot of other nationalities really quite disappointed, and there'll be lots of cricket boards who are impoverished to the point where they are barely surviving. So the ICC have gone missing, no leadership, big surprise. Australia and India, who knows what they are thinking together about what... The disappointing thing is Australia seem to have decided they can't host the IPL. The T20 World Cup. Now, I find that a little bit disappointing because the cases in Australia, while it's still a challenge, there are a lot fewer cases in Australia than there are in India. And we're talking about all the same players basically going to India. Puzzling? No? Is it just me? I'm puzzled. So if Australia don't want to host it, give it to New Zealand, who are COVID-free right now, and forego the fact you're not hosting it. But what instead they're saying is, we'll give our window to India, and then, by the way, we'll have the window again to host it the following year. Is that fair? It seems to me a little bit of a carve-up.
Should I say something?
Please, yeah, please.
It's an interesting one. What George says, it's a little unfair. Yes, in a way that IPL is the be all and end all, because at the end those are 60 same matches. 1 to 60, they're all same matches. Everybody's going to chase, and the IPL gets at some point during the tournament, the IPL gets really, really repetitive. But here, or in fact, not just here, in the next 2-3 years, especially until 2023, 2024, commercials are going to define a lot of cricket, a lot of time that is devoted to which tournament needs to be played, and when and where. Now, there are a lot of ifs and buts here. West Indies tour of England and Pakistan tour of England, we're talking about creating biosecure environments or healthy environments for 3 teams. That's just 3 teams. 16 teams landing in Australia and playing across 7 cities.
Just
it's impossible to.
It's 7 teams.
Sorry?
Just to run through it. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm doing this in my head. England men, England's women. Yeah? They're all playing this summer. Ireland are coming to England. Australia meant to be coming to England. Pakistan, West Indies. And then the women are meant to be playing against India and South Africa, I think, yeah?
Yeah, but that's not going to go ahead.
Okay, well, so that's actually 8 teams, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I've just named eight teams, most of whom are going to be in the country at the same time. Okay? So from Sunday or Monday, 4 of them will be here, I think, at least. So, okay, so it's not
I agree.
exactly the same.
I agree.
I'm not saying there aren't significant challenges, but it seems to me that each board has taken quite a selfish view, and maybe they should, maybe that's their role, to defend and protect their own interests. But unless someone looks at the wider interests of all the countries who make up the ICC, then what do we end up with at the end? We just end up with the situation we go in, 2 or 3 countries left playing international cricket against each other. I think that'd be a shame. I think long-term the sport will diminish, and actually long-term, even the IPL will diminish, because unless the IPL has these great stars which it's able to call on from, say, New Zealand or the Caribbean, then it's not as good a product, is it? So we have to encourage, even from the most selfish capitalist viewpoint, we have to encourage others to help ourselves in the end. And the view seems to be so short-sighted, so selfish, that in the end, they will damage cricket. And there's a reason why we need the World T20 to happen with 16 nations to encourage the growth around the game, which will eventually create a stronger IPL as well. That's all. It's not a black and white argument. It's not easy. There are not perfect solutions. But I do worry when I look at what's happening now, that we seem to be encouraging a tournament to go ahead in a nation where COVID seems to still be growing. And we're saying it's not going to take place in a country or part of the world, in New Zealand in particular, where it seems to have been subjugated at this stage. So, and the reasons I don't really believe are about health. I don't really think they're even about wealth. I think they're just about self. And do I think that's right? Should I come on a podcast that is mainly going to be viewed by people in India and say this? No, not if I want a happy Twitter life. But, you know, that's my honest view.
It's not just about, getting 16 teams into one country. That's just the one aspect. There's also the aspect that what happens to, yes, everybody is selfish. I mean, Cricket Australia doesn't want to host the T20 World Cup. They want to host India for 5 test matches instead because they're getting $300 million out of it. How much are they getting from the T20 World Cup? Less than $70 million.
No, they get masses. They want both. But let's be very clear. They want to do both. That's what...
No, they don't. They've already... Okay, Cricket Australia has already written a letter to ICC that they cannot host this year. They want to host next year.
Next year instead. So they want to do both. They're not.
No, they want to do 2021. No, they want. Earl Eddings has sent a letter to the ICC.
Yeah, so
which
they just
clearly states. Yeah, they want to do it next year, not this year. They want to do both. But what is the priority this year? Yeah, they want to do both. Everybody. Yeah, why would they give it away? But my question is, this year, what is the priority? The priority for them is the Indian Tour of Australia, which gives them $300 million. So you can't expect the BCCI to send a team over first for the T20 World Cup, then send a team over for the Indian Tour of Australia, then invite England over for 5 test matches, and then in turn let go of an opportunity to play a tournament that's going to give you 5,000 crore rupees. That's just not going to happen. Because yes, everybody's looking after their interests, but also the fact that a strong Indian cricket, a healthy Indian cricket, will be able to help out other nations as well. Over the next 2-3 years, short series of 3 ODIs and 3 T20s are going to be very useful for very, very different boards. India going to Sri Lanka for 3 ODIs and 3 T20s, going to South Africa for 3 ODIs and 3 T20s. Right now, 4 cricket boards do not have broadcast rights. Cricket economy is totally dependent on broadcast rights, totally and utterly. And 4 cricket boards right now do not have new broadcast deals. And they will go bust if they do not get those broadcast deals. How will they get those broadcast deals is when India confirms their next tour. And that is how the cricket economy is going to shape up over the next 2-3 years. You just cannot displease India. Yes, it's unfair. The world is unfair. Yes, but right now, the game is in survival mode, and you just can't say, okay, the BCCI cannot play the IPL and we'll play the rest of the tournaments as they were scheduled.
There's a lot of truth in that. A lot of truth in that. And I don't think we're completely disagreeing. But let's not pretend that these countries,
no, I agree.
They earn quite a lot from playing in the World T20. It's very important to them. Or the T20 World Cup, as it's now called. And it's just that my worry would be, I'll say again, that the IPL could end up with 2, 3, 4 windows within 14 months. And there is a price to pay for that for everybody else. And everyone understands. Yeah. Look, everyone who loves cricket wants the IPL to happen. All the players want it to happen.
Yeah.
But at what cost? And particularly if they're trying to force it to happen at a time when it probably isn't sensible to happen. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But right around the world, people are really, really struggling right now. And the world team.
I don't want to disappoint you, George, but as things are going, and if they continue going the way they are, there'll be 2 IPLs, one in September, October, and one in April, May next year. So just be ready for that.
That could easily happen, and that might
easily
could accelerate the direction in which the game's going. And is that a good direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with your points, but the realities are different of world cricket at the moment.
I think some very valid points made on the commercial aspects and the financial health of the game. Just stepping back for a second and taking a look at the England-West Indies series. The England Cricket Board extended a loan to the West Indies Cricket Board prior to this series. And by all looks of it, it seems that it was lent to them to facilitate this tour to England, because the West Indies Cricket Board is obviously facing significant cash flow issues. Is this an example of how we can work together? I mean, we are obviously having competing interests with the IPL, the T20 World Cup, our own domestic bilateral series.
Yes, it's good. Look, the worry is not so much that it was an inducement tour, because it has helped them tour, no doubt, but it's not so much that. West Indies want to tour, England really anyway. Their principal sponsor is Sandals, which is a big holiday destination company who have a big market in attracting English people to go to the Caribbean. So it sort of makes sense for them to tour in many ways anyway. The worry was more, and the reason it was investigated by the ICC Ethics Committee, was in case it was an inducement to vote for the next chairman, or the next chair rather. So that's why it's investigated, and that's a legitimate fear. That's completely legitimate that would be looked into. But do we want a situation where the bigger nations help the smaller nations, and that everyone sees it's for the greater good of the game? Yes. And isn't it wonderful that Pakistan and West Indies again have coming to England this English season to play? I mean, English cricket owes them a lot. It's not quite fair to say England wouldn't have done the same. I don't know whether they would. I don't know. But let's remember that England did go back to India after the terrorist attacks in 2008, and they did go to Bangladesh in 2016 when, some people wouldn't have done. I suspect that if roles have been reversed and the England team and their families have been reading the death toll, which is what it is in England, in the Caribbean ahead of a tour, I suspect they wouldn't have gone, but I might be wrong. But if it means that England is more sympathetic towards the needs of these other nations, are more likely to go to Pakistan, which I think would be a brilliant thing to do, then great. And isn't it great that they're working together? I applaud that, and I think isn't it good for everybody? We're going to get cricket to watch on TV. That's great, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think, as a cricket fan, it's just great to see something live to consume. There's only so many YouTube videos from Rob Linda that we can watch to sustain ourselves through this shelter-in-place or lockdown. I'll pass it along to my co-anchor Vivek.
What are the potential windows do you see of IPL being conducted? There are reports that the peak may not reach in India till November. There are certain reports which are coming. So are we looking at exploring at options like you mentioned UAE or Sri Lanka? And to that effect, do you think it is possible to happen this year itself? Because there is T20 World Cup happening this year. And if it is not happening, then we have, as you mentioned, 2 T20 World Cups, then a 50-over World Cup. And then we have 3 IPL editions which need to be conducted. So how do you see this playing out?
Okay, I'm going to be shamelessly plugging my podcast here. Okay, so everybody who's listening to this podcast, including the hosts and George, everybody just go and listen to the first episode of my podcast, Hotspot. The second season's first episode. The episode is titled, "Is the T20 World Cup going to happen this year?" I can tell you the answer. Spoiler alert: yes, it's not going to happen this year. The T20 World Cup, I can give you a written guarantee, it's not going to happen this year. It's a little complicated regarding the IPL. First of all, let me just say that the BCCI, yes, it seems very, very turbulent. In my podcast, you'll also get the reasons why the T20 World Cup won't happen this year, but that's a separate topic. On the surface, the BCCI might seem a very turbulent organization because something is going on, something is cooking all the time. But beneath the surface, they have a very, very good administrative and operations team. Despite all the turbulence, the Ranji Trophy is never disrupted. The international matches, India's tours, they're never disrupted. All deals go through, all sponsorships, marketing, everything goes through, everything works like clockwork. So right now, I can tell you the BCCI has already prepared their contingency plans A, B, C for the IPL. They're already in place. As regards to when it'll touch a peak, when the pandemic will touch a peak in India, I personally think it'll be somewhere in July, August, which will coincide with the monsoon season. November, I think we'll all be dead if it peaks in November. Let me be very honest. I mean, it's such a frightening thing right now. But yeah, nobody can predict it. I think the BCCI is genuinely looking to take the IPL out of India for the 2020 season. And a couple of countries like Sri Lanka and the UAE have offered to host it. Now, there have been a couple of times when the IPL has gone outside India. 2009, the entire tournament went out, and then 14, when the elections happened, half the tournament went out. This is going to be totally different from those situations. Yes, the entire tournament will go out, but when it went out the last time, you needed people in the stands. You needed 7, 8 stadiums. This time, you don't need that. Saurav Ganguly, the BCCI president, has already announced that this year's IPL will be a television-only event. So what do you really need? You really need only 2 stadiums. Once you get those 2 stadiums, you can have one match at one game at one stadium, and you can have 2 matches a day. You can have all 8 teams and the broadcasting team living in the same city. For example, UAE, Dubai, Abu Dhabi. You can play a game in Dubai. Later in the evening, you can play a game in Abu Dhabi. Next day, play a game in Dubai, play a game in Abu Dhabi. So you can have 2 games a day. Overall, in 30 days, the entire tournament done and dusted. Let me give you a guarantee the IPL will happen this year. Possibly not in India, but maybe in Sri Lanka, maybe in the UAE. The options are being explored. And there's a good chance the IPL will go outside India for a 3rd time.
Sure.
And the window, you asked the window.
Yeah.
The BCCI is targeting September, October before the Indian tour of Australia. There's George had mentioned the ICC chairman's elections. it has a lot of bearing. The ICC chairman's elections has a lot of bearing on what is going to happen in world cricket, whether it's international cricket, whether it's the T20 World Cup, whether it's the IPL, whatever happens over the next 15 to 18 months, the ICC chairman's election has a lot of bearing on that. So the BCCI is waiting for certain announcements, but they can only wait so much longer. There will come a date when they will announce the IPL schedule.
Sure, Chetan, but what we are hearing from Pakistan is that Pakistan is adamant that Asia Cup has to happen, which they have given the rights to Sri Lanka, and they say it's not going to have it has to happen. It has to take precedence over IPL. So, I mean, do you think it is going to play out like that?
It's a very simple question. I'm going to ask you a simple question, and just bear with me.
Yeah.
Star Sports is the IPL broadcaster. Star Sports is also the Asia Cup broadcaster. 60 IPL matches, 13 Asia Cup matches. Which will Star Sports broadcast? Tell me. You answer.
I think pretty evident. Yeah, IPL has to be IPL in all the way. Probably.
So don't take me wrong. No, they can't do both. They can't do both, George, because if the BCCI doesn't send an Indian team, Star Sports, to the Asia Cup, and because they're all busy playing the IPL, Star Sports will not broadcast the Asia Cup. Simple as that. So that's your answer. I'm sorry to say this, Pakistan Cricket Board can say whatever it wants, but right now only three things matter. When or if the T20 World Cup will happen or not. I don't think it will happen. When will the IPL happen? And then the dominoes will start falling in place. ECB is very lucky that a lot of their international schedule is not affected right now by what Australia is doing or what India is doing. If all of this had happened next year, when India is supposed to play in England, it would have been a totally different ball game altogether.
Sure. A couple of more questions from my end, Chetan and Dobell. And probably the elephant in the Indian cricket, if I can call that, Ravi Shastri has said that if MSD has a good IPL, you can see him in the Indian colors. Do you think that's going to happen, or the Indian cricket team has actually moved past MSD?
You're asking me?
Yeah. Or either of you can jump in, probably.
Okay. George, do you want to take this? I'll take it after you.
Be my guest.
Okay. Okay. I think if the T20 World Cup doesn't happen this year, I think we've already seen the last of MS Dhoni. Yes, he will play this year's IPL. He might play if there's another IPL in April, he'll probably play that. But then by the time the T20 World Cup happens next year in October, if it happens again or where it happens, he'll almost be 40. So again, there are a lot of ifs and buts. We don't know when the IPL is going to happen, if it is going to happen, are 2 seasons going to happen. I think as painful as it sounds, because he's one of my all-time favorite cricketers, I think we've already seen the last of MS Dhoni. I think right now what Ravi Shastri said last year, or for that matter, even Virat Kohli said that, even the selectors said that. I think everybody has said that if he has a good IPL, he can go to the World Cup. I think that was last year when the pandemic hadn't happened. Right now, it's a totally new reality. And I think MS Dhoni also understands this.
Sure. Thank you on that, Chetan.
I've given you I've given you another headline, so use this one. Okay?
If you change track and come to Test match cricket, and 2 questions on that front. With so many series being cancelled or rescheduled, what do you make of the present Test Championship cycle which is happening? Do you see how do you see it playing out? And secondly, do you think this is the right time where everybody is working from home, where cricket boards can actually prioritize Test cricket over other profitable forms of cricket? Or we see, as we have been having that discussion over, probably it's the more profitable series and tournaments which will take precedence over Test cricket? George, if you could.
Well, Test cricket's profitable in the UK. It's very profitable. It's actually, I think it's still the most profitable format of the game in England for various reasons, because the grounds are sold out. The grounds aren't as big as the grounds in India or Australia. But, you know, you can get 20 to 25, 30,000 people, and they'll sell out almost every day of the summer. The broadcasting deal is still good for Test cricket, and there still seems to be a big appetite for it. And England take a lot of supporters when they go away. You know, if England go to the Caribbean, they would routinely take 6, 8, 10,000 people who spend a fortune. So it's quite a big deal in some economies to welcome this number of people who are going to, you know, stay in hotels, eat in restaurants, and most of all, drink prolifically. So I wouldn't diminish Test cricket's financial viability at this stage, certainly in England. Now, that's different elsewhere, isn't it? There's just no way around it. The World Test Championship was brought in. I mean, I think we all understand why, but it cannot work in this current cycle. There's just, we can't get the games in. And I think that actually that's an opportunity, because although it was meant to bring relevance to every encounter, I don't think it was particularly, I don't think the point structure was either simple enough or fair enough that it really worked. And I don't really, I've never been sure that it appealed anyway. I mean, I don't know, did it interest, did it interest you? Do you think it added anything to the game? I guess we were all cricket lovers anyway. Did it interest you, really?
For me, I would have personally liked to have seen a championship final where we were playing India versus Australia in Lords. I think that would just add something, another feature to the whole or viewing experience, or to the whole setup.
That would, because for various reasons. One, it's a final. Two, it's a unique venue for both sides in a way, and you know they wouldn't have played each other there before. So by the time you get to the final, but what about all the teams that don't reach the final? I don't think it was working. And maybe this is an opportunity to go back to the drawing board, because there's no way we can squeeze the games we need into the cycle we have. So let's have another look at it, shall we? And it did look a little bit as if it were arranged to make sure that India were in the final. Did it not look as if it was arranged for broadcast revenue? And is that a good place to start? If you remember going way back, the Champions League, which was a decent enough idea, it didn't work because the regs of the competition were just unfair. And again, they were designed to ensure that Indian teams reached the final. Do you remember Mumbai playing Somerset? Somerset were allowed 2 overseas players, and Mumbai were allowed 5. And so before the tournament, they said it was 4, and then they said to preserve the integrity of the tournament, they were going to allow Mumbai another one. Nonsense. And because of that, the credibility of the competition, which should have been all right, was undermined. And it's the same with this, really. Unless you allow merit to find its own place, unless you know disappointment as a supporter, God knows, growing up watching England and New Zealand, I had a lot of disappointment. You never really appreciate joy. So if we sort of guarantee that every global event, that Pakistan and India will play each other, maybe it loses a wee bit of that sort of precious, unique element. And maybe equally, if we try and engineer a situation where Australia, England and India play each other so often and play each other in this World Test Championship final, maybe it loses a bit of the excitement that it would have done if, say, Pakistan and New Zealand played. I don't know. I just think you've got to allow sport to find its own level, and I don't think we've done that.
Chetan, anything to add?
I quite like the World Test, the idea of the World Test Championship, playing it over 2-3 years, or a year or 6 months or 8 months, and then you have, culminating in a final at Lords. I know BCCI wanted to host a final maybe in 23 or 25 at Bangalore, in the summer months at Bangalore. So they even had those thoughts. But I did not like the format. I don't agree with the notion that it was favoring India. It's just that India were playing a lot of test matches immediately after the World Cup, and then they had a period, or in fact this year they were not going to play any test matches apart from 2 in New Zealand and 4 in Australia. So it allows other teams to win and catch up. I mean, so while I disagree with that notion, but again, the format was really a very disruptive format. There was no uniformity in it. There was no, I mean, cricket doesn't really have many tournaments that have a uniform or a streamlined structure. But this one was really rugged. This one was really raw. The points system was not very equitable. So for me, it worked. The whole idea that, there is a definitive, everybody goes around saying pinnacle of cricket, pinnacle of cricket. But who's the champion? Who's really the champion? I mean, you're looking at a number one team. Anybody who's a world number one test team, half of their ranking points are from 3 years ago. So we don't really have a definitive test champion in that sense. So I think this time allows us, or allows the ICC, if they can ever sit down and discuss this, to maybe recognize a proper format for the World Test Championship. Yes, let it play out over 2 years or 3 years, and then you have maybe two semi-finals and a final, maybe a 3-week tournament or a 2.5 week tournament in England or in India, wherever. But yes, you need to properly structure that format over 2 years. But yes, for next year, this cycle is gone. Forget the World Test Championship final next year. Just forget about it. Yeah.
Got you. Just 2 questions, and then we'll wrap it up. The first one for you, Chetan, is that I think one of the most exciting tournaments this year, and I know it's been a truncated international calendar thus far, but the Women's T20 World Cup was something that definitely captured the imagination of fans in India. We've seen over the last few years that there's been progressive improvements in the Indian women's team. And now, the common fan is aware of the stars in the game and who are the upcoming stars. Many saw this as an opportunity for us to plug in a women's IPL, just similar to what you have in Australia with the Women's Big Bash. Do you think that is something that is still realistic? Maybe it's just pushed down the line, or is it something that will be forgotten because that momentum which was generated might just dissipate with all of the breaks we've had?
No, I don't think the momentum will be lost, because there will be more women's tournaments. Hopefully over the next couple of years. There's supposed to be a Women's World Cup, ODI World Cup in New Zealand next year. I really hope it goes through, because like George pointed out, New Zealand is relatively free, and Women's World Cup, they would want to push the game through. I think the idea of the women's IPL has been pushed back a couple of years. Right now, there's just too much on the BCCI's plate to think about the women's IPL. I know for a fact that they were mulling over it. Maybe in a couple of years' time, maybe next year or the year after, we probably would have seen a 4 or 5 team IPL, women's IPL. They were really mulling over it. They're playing exhibition matches. So it was really gaining momentum. What the T20 World Cup, Women's T20 World Cup this year did was give us a few new names in the women's team, especially Shefali Verma. I mean, personally, in my opinion, I think she could be the Sachin Tendulkar for women's cricket in India. I mean, a young, raw batsman, attacking, full of flair. Everybody likes her. Everybody wants to watch her. Everybody tunes in when she's batting. And if she continues the way that she is right now, and becomes even a better player, I mean, in the final when India lost and she was out for a duck, or not for a duck, I think 1 or 2, whatever, very cheaply in the first over, and she was crying in the dugout. I don't think that, I think every Indian felt that, and I think that feeling has never been there for women's cricket. And I think while the momentum has dissipated just a bit, it has not been lost. We do have star players in the women's cricket. Over the next couple of years, it will develop. And then if and when the ICC tournaments, especially the women's tournaments, happen again, they will allow us to regain that momentum and push forward with the women's IPL, because it has to happen. For the betterment of women's cricket in India, the women's IPL has to happen.
George, some positive developments even from the England women's side. I believe that the England women are now centrally contracted, and any prospects for the 100 or something, or a tournament of that format being extended to women's cricket in England?
No, it was already. That was an integral part of it. That was one of the perceived benefits of the 100. Look, I'm no fan of the 100. I just think it's an unnecessary risk. I don't mind it being played over 100 balls. I don't like it being played in a window, and I don't like it being only 8 teams. But the women's tournament is absolutely integral to the 100. So the ECB are pretty good in terms of they've tried to do the right things in the last few years. But one of the things that we've learned is that Australia are years ahead in women's cricket, and it's not just that they have a freakishly talented group of cricketers. It's also they've invested in it. They've invested in it hugely, and they've led the way. And everyone, England and India must follow. The only bad thing about the women's 100 is it came at the expense of the Kia Super League, which is a 20-over competition, women's 20-over competition, which had been quite good. It was developing its own support base. It was doing okay, and they've abandoned it. I think that's a mistake, and I think it's a shame. Women's sport is in an interesting place in the UK, but I think most people would agree that it's ripe for a huge amount of growth and development. And even if it were not morally clearly the right thing to do, I think most authorities would agree that financially it's a huge untapped resource. So it's going to happen. It might take time, and we've all got a duty to encourage and develop it.
Great. Just one final question, and I think this one is something that all Indian cricket fans can, relate to. If you see the mandatory quarantine period, which is part of any touring side's protocol in England now, both the Pakistanis as well as the West Indies have been quarantining. That means that they're spending more time on the ground in England acclimatizing. As an Indian cricket fan, our biggest gripe with the BCCI on foreign tours has been that we just drop our players in right ahead of a series without substantial practice matches, or in the Indians' cases, we don't even take the practice matches serious. But at least we don't spend enough time on the ground acclimatizing before the first test, and as a result, India almost always loses the first test abroad. Do you think that these mandatory quarantine protocols are going to have an impact on the game, wherein West Indies might be better suited now, better acclimatized, and might be more competitive? Or is it just going to be more of the same stuff?
Well, I don't know, but your point's clearly right. It would help India if their players had longer to acclimatise. They did try last time, didn't they? But what do you do? They're so busy. There's too many demands on them. But Virat did try and play for Surrey last time, didn't he? And no doubt, had he played a couple of championship games for Surrey, well, he did all right anyway, didn't he? But he would have done even better, no doubt. And I'm sure that Ravi Ashwin benefited for his spells at Worcester and Notts, which he seemed to really enjoy, by the way, because he could just walk through the streets and no one would bother him, and he seemed to really, really love that. He was very friendly and chatty in a way, including with journalists, in a way that I haven't seen him when I've covered international tournaments. The problem with the West Indies right now is that they're not actually going to play a lot of games, are they? We're in the weird situation where the first class game of the summer is going to be West Indies v West Indies A next week. But they're actually only going to play one first-class game, and it's basically their A team v their B team. How much will they learn from that? I don't know. I mean, England aren't going to have played either, but you would think that they would know the conditions. So I take the point, but it's not as if they're playing the counties. It's not as if they're getting to move around the country and experience different conditions. They're basically just playing in Manchester, which isn't a particularly English style pitch in lots of ways anyway. So I think West Indies in particular actually have got it quite tough. And I don't think they're going to get every advantage that a touring team normally would. But what can we do? What can anyone do about that situation? I say again, we've all got to accept we're not in an ideal situation. Just get the game on. I really hope that, because Cricket West Indies is in this weird position at the moment, where I think that the current administration are doing an awful lot right. But you look at the results, and the financial results are poor. Well, they would be, wouldn't they? And they might well lose to England, and that could be used against them. But let's remember, West Indies haven't won in England since 1988, I think. Australia haven't won in England since 2001 or whatever. It's very hard to win Test series in England these days, generally. And I hope it's not held against them, as if, everything in West Indies cricket is wrong, because they've actually done world cricket, and English cricket in particular, a favour by coming. They're not going to get a very good warm-up preparation period. They'll get as good as they can, but, it's not the same. And it would be a damn shame if that comes back to slap them in the face. All I would say is people keep rubbishing West Indies. I don't know how many series I've done in the Caribbean, 3 or 4. They keep embarrassing England one way or another. They beat them, barely a year ago, and they beat them good and proper. It wasn't lucky; they were the better side. Don't rule them out, because that's a terrific bowling attack. And the main thing is, it's just cricket. Thank goodness it's happening again.
Agreed. Chetan?
I think this point that you made about acclimatization, it's not going to work that way. I mean, acclimatization doesn't work in the sense that they go and live in a hotel room for 15 days and you're acclimatized. Acclimatization is when you play on those pitches, you play on those grounds, and pitches, not just, because you're playing on an Australian pitch. No, a pitch which would be similar to what you would get in the test matches. I mean, you can practice on the Perth wicket, and if you're playing all your test matches in Adelaide, you're not acclimatized. I mean, that's the difference there. So just by saying that, okay, the Indian team is going there for 15 days ahead of the tour and they'll acclimatize, no, that's not going to work. What the Indian team will not mind is India A versus India B practice match, because as it is, they don't really care about practice matches. They're happier doing mid-wicket net practice. They're happier if Shami and Ishant are bowling to their openers, but in the middle of the ground on the match day wicket. So that India won't mind. But in terms of acclimatization, just because they're going ahead 15 days for a quarantine, they like getting out, walking around, if they're allowed. I don't think quarantine means you're allowed to walk around. I think they'll be locked in a particular hotel. But yeah, I don't see how that is going. Like, I'm talking about India going to Australia this year. The only way I see it being beneficial is if you're playing all 4 test matches in Australia at one venue. If you're playing at Adelaide, because then you're staying in Adelaide and you're playing in Adelaide and you're practicing in Adelaide, and then you're playing 4 test matches in Adelaide. Now that is an advantage that India could exploit, because they have done really well at Adelaide Oval in the last 2 tours. But otherwise, if it's all spread around, you're playing at the Gabba, Adelaide, MCG, SCG, and then you're quarantining and you're practicing elsewhere. That's neither here nor there.
Well, Australia has been pretty adamant that India is avoiding the Gabatoir, Brisbane. So I think they're going to get their wish this time, and we're definitely going to have a test over there.
I'm not saying anything to that.
Great, guys. Maybe before we let you go, we just have one request. Could we get some predictions for the upcoming series, both George and Chetan?
George, you first.
Well, which series are we talking about?
Yes, the West Indies series and then the Pakistan series, the 2 test series.
I think England probably favourites. Home series, Duke's ball, West Indies missing 2 or 3 players who would have been in their top order batting. I think England are favourites, and I think they probably are for the Pakistan series too. That's it.
Any Glenn McGrath-esque predictions of 3-0 for both the series?
No. But I've given you a prediction. I think that England-India series, the series that should be in India, won't be, and I think it'll be in the UAE. But it might all be in Mumbai. I don't know. I suspect it'll be in the UAE because TV matters. There's my prediction, and also that me and Chetan, we're going to get a lot of flack on Twitter in the next week.
Oh yeah, and I hope you don't use that particular headline. I've given you many headlines today. Prediction time. Prediction time. I think England will win both Test series, but I would really love for West Indies to win the Test series against England like they did in the Caribbean. Their bowling attack is so beautiful, that pace bowling attack. I think Jason Holder is not given as much credit as the West Indies Test captain as he should be. The West Indies Cricket Board has not made it easy for him. he's had an immensely tough job, and I think he should be given a little more credit for how West Indies have shaped up as a unit, given their lack of resources or lack of commitment from star players towards Test cricket. I would really love to see West Indies win the Test series, but I think they will nick one of the three Test matches. Yeah, one of the three Test matches. That bowling attack is really fearsome because England, they haven't had their summer, right? Summer of cricket, maybe a bit rusty. They've only started practicing a couple of weeks back. So the first Test in Southampton, if the conditions are right, and Southampton can be a bit wobbly under the right conditions. So you never know. I would really love to see West Indies win a Test match.
I think the cricket romantics in all of us would love to see a West Indies, a resurgent West Indies team. But on that note, let's all look forward to the upcoming series. And I want to thank both of you as well as Asif Bhai for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
it's been a real pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye,
See
Joy.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye.
I check it like Yuvraj Singh's bowling it, yeah? I really don't mind.
You hit me once, I hit you back.
He's bowling like my Auntie Annie when she'd had too much sherry to drink.
Played over my head, then I set fire.
मैंने कहा बेटा बेटा होता है और बाप बाप होता है.